You could feel the electricity in the stadium before the scar tissue of the game took over. Jaxson Dart was playing like the kid who belonged there, decisive with his arm, dangerous with his legs, and the Giants looked like a team that had stumbled onto something. Then, a designed quarterback run turned wrong. Dart went to the sideline for a concussion check, and the whole contest tilted toward Chicago. Dart's first 3 quarters read like a breakout audition. He finished 19 of 29 for 242 yards before leaving, and he wasn't just making throws, he was making plays. 66 rushing yards and 2 rushing touchdowns. He moved with the kind of confident urgency that forces defenses to account for both his eyes and his feet. The Giants were up 17-10 when the injury happened, and in that moment, the game stopped being about execution and started being about contingency. When a starter goes out with a head injury, the question isn't only who can replace him, it's whether the replacement can keep the pulse of the offense steady under stress. Enter Russell Wilson, a veteran who hasn't had many live, high-leverage snaps this year. He steadied the unit briefly, engineering a field goal drive, but he was sacked twice on a drive that could have iced the game for New York. Those sacks were momentum killers. Instead of bleeding clock and forcing Chicago to earn every yard, the Giants punted and handed the Bears life, and the Bears took it. For most of the afternoon, Chicago had looked punchless in the red zone, with drops and pressure leaving Williams out of rhythm. But football is a game of swings, and a turnover plus a short field gave roll and confidence back to a team that needed it. An 8-play drive for a field goal cut the lead. Then a shanked punt late gifted the Bears excellent position with the clock dwindling. Caleb Williams, who had been under duress all game, accepted the invitation to be decisive in the fourth quarter. What separated the finish from the earlier tape was clarity of intent. Williams mixed short rhythmic throws with aggressive pocket punctuation, and when the defense collapsed, he used his legs. His 17-yard rushing touchdown late was equal parts power and timing. A design dash that turned into an exclamation point. Suddenly, the scoreboard read 24-20 with 1:47 left, and the pressure shifted back to New York. Those final 2 minutes are a microcosm of why experience matters and why momentum is fragile. Russell Wilson had the ball and time. He had space to push a drive into field goal range, maybe farther. Instead, he went 1 for 5 for 0 yards on the final possession. A failed fourth down conversion ended any hope and flipped the story from what might have been into what was. Let's not sanitize what Dart was doing before the injury. He was decisive, mobile, and dangerous. He made throws that suggested NFL pocket growth and runs that turned ordinary plays into scoring opportunities. The Giants' offensive identity suddenly felt like a hybrid. Get to the edges when you can. What happens when a season's mood hangs on a single whistle? One fumble, one helmet-to-turf moment, and everything wasn't just playing. He was commanding. The rookie moved with an edge that made the Giants look less like an underdog and more like a team with teeth. He completed throws with timing. He used his legs when the pocket locked down. It felt like the tide was tilting toward New York. Then the designed run. Exhales like a place remembering how to hope. That fumble shifted more than field position. It shifted belief. When Jaxson left the sideline to the blue tent and then into the locker room for a concussion evaluation, you could feel both teams sense the game. He marched them to a field goal, kept the scoreboard ticking. But Wilson's plays felt precise in a way that lacked the spontaneous ignition Dart had been offering. For the Bears, the interruption was a reset. Caleb Williams stopped fighting the game and started conducting it. Williams' day had been messy. He'd worked under duress, been funneled out of structure, and battled drops that made the first half feel like a draft film study of what could have gone wrong. But the moment a turnover handed him momentum, he found his pulse. The Bears moved, then scored, then moved again. The rushing touchdown late, a 17-yard sprint that put Chicago ahead with under 2 minutes left, wasn't just a thrill. What's easy to miss in the panic of that final drive is how fragile the whole sequence was for the Giants. They had slipped from a position of control to a hair's breadth scramble. Wilson's last stand was admirable in effort, but brittle in execution. One big sack, a shanked punt earlier, a miscommunication on a fourth down try, all those little fractures added up. The Giants had the chance to answer after the Bears' go-ahead score, and they failed to string the plays together. The final fourth down attempt ended the night, and with it, a what if that will live in the highlights forever. This game is both a microcosm of the season and a lesson in momentum's cruelty. Dart's play before the concussion felt like promise unwrapped. 19 of 29, 242 yards, 2 TDs on the ground, a commanding presence that made you imagine what the Giants could be with him healthy. The concussion, sudden, clinical, badly timed, takes him off the field and possibly off the next week's depth chart. That's not just a roster problem, it's an existential one for a team that has been trying to stitch offensive identity back together. If Dart misses time, the Giants lose more than a starter. They lose a catalyst. For Chicago, the win is the kind of medicine you bottle and label belief. The Bears have been learning to win the late-game skirmish, and Caleb's heroics in the fourth are the kind of patchwork victories that stitch confidence into a locker room. It's messy, sure. Relying on late comebacks is a treadmill that can save you 1 week and bankrupt you the next. But for a team that's often been brittle in the clutch, finding ways to finish is progress. Ben Johnson's squad now sits 6-3, and that's a seat at a very noisier table than anyone expected a month ago. There are tactical beats here that coaches will chew on until film study turns to obsession. The Giants' offensive line allowed multiple sacks and pressure at the worst possible times. Russell Wilson's sacks late were killers, not because he was slow, but because the protection schemes didn't hold up when the Bears brought heat. The shanked punt was a special teams malpractice that handed Chicago field position on a silver platter. Those tiny sins aren't sexy to talk about, but they are the spine of a loss. On the flip side, Chicago's offensive awakening after the turnover was textbook. Calm, methodical progress downfield, patience in the red zone, and finally, a blend of aggression and craft on the game-winning drive. Williams' 17-yard touchdown wasn't a fluke. It was the product of a defense stretched thin, linebackers slow to react, and a quarterback willing to take the hit to finish the job. It's growth that looks both courageous and, frankly, a little terrifying for opponents. There's also the human story that pulses under the scoreboard. Jaxson Dart isn't a statistic. He's a kid whose season could be altered overnight by a concussion. Not just for a game, but for the way defenses will approach him, for how coaches manage his reps, for how his confidence rebuilds over weeks and months. Concussion protocols are strict for a reason. The Giants will do the right medical thing. But make no mistake, football loves to keep score, and the tally for youth and momentum is merciless. For Caleb Williams, this game does two things. It cements his reputation as a closer with a clutch gene, and it also exposes him to the kind of pressure that will now be expected each week. Longer arc is tantalizing. The Bears are 6-3 and in it, which means every winning margin now matters for playoff tiebreakers and confidence. The Giants, if Dart's absence lingers, will face a delicate question. Do they hope the long-term payoff justifies short-term pain? Either way, this game hurts. Triumphs are public spectacles, but losses and injuries carve out private spaces that linger longer. So what's the takeaway? Momentum is a living thing. It eats the small mistakes you don't immediately see and turns them in a flash of misfortune. The Bears turned a moment of chaos into a symphony of late-game orchestration. For fans on both sides, the night will be reframed into highlight packages and hot takes. For the teams, it will translate into tape work, rehab schedules, and the kind of gritty conversations coaches dread. If there's a final image to leave you with, it's this: a stadium split between hope and noise, a rookie who ran like he belonged until the ball came out, and on the other side, a young quarterback who took the handed chaos and made it his. Football is cruel in how quickly the arc changes, but it's generous in how it hands everyone the next snap. Tonight, the snap favored Chicago. Tomorrow, it's not by talent, but by who seizes the sudden chances life gives them in the dark.